Our guest today is a novelist who has been compared to John Cheever. His debut novel was a finalist in the Literary Fiction Reader's Favorites competition, and I'll say this wasn't because he just got lucky. He's recently released the next in the series, which I'm sure will shoot straight to the top. Today, we are going to talk about both novels, what inspired them, and his writing process. So please give a warm and welcome counterculture-wise welcome to Toby Brooks.
Yay.
Thanks for having me today. Pleasure to
Happy to have you.
So Toby, you are not at home. You are on the other side of the planet. Are you vacationing right now?
My wife and I rented a little house on the tip of Long Island. We have 2 kids living in New York, so they're kind of coming out back and forth to see us. And then we have another child in Boston, so he's been down. We have one in LA who's hopefully going to make it out. We actually have the house for 2 weeks, so yeah.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
Well, thank you so much for taking time from your vacation to meet with us today. I was expecting a sunny California backdrop, and so there you are.
Sunny New York backdrop.
It is nice. The view is beautiful.
Yeah, well, you one of the places that you actually do live is Carmel by the Sea, or as anybody who lives in Central California calls it, simply Carmel, because we already know it's by the sea. It's a beautiful town, a very, very lovely place I've been to a couple of times.
And Jim was born in LA, so he's our California baby.
Yeah. Excellent.
And me, I'm a native Texan, so. Well, before we get started, I always want to give our guests the chance to tell everybody listening and watching where they can find you on the interwebs and how they can find your books.
Well, thanks, Melanie. The easiest way to get to my books and to my background and my bio information would be through my website, which is tobybrooks.com. And that's TOBYBROOKES. The E is often dropped. It's
I saw that when I was searching you up, that it always wanted to take that E out. So put that E in there.
Put that E in there, and that'll have links to both books, reviews, my background, interviews, podcasts I've done. Maybe I'll put yours on if you're amenable to that.
Of course.
Absolutely.
And yeah, it's a very efficient way. Thank God for the internet. I mean, it's really opened things up a lot.
Yeah, it really has. It really has. Okay, well, I have so many questions for you. I made a little bullet point here. The first thing I want to start with, though, is your name is John Talbot Brooks, which I think sounds really regal and like a fantastic pen name. So what made you choose to become Toby?
Well, that was my parents' decision. My dad's name was John, and he had a very good friend by the name of Talbot Hilliard out of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And they called Talbot Hilliard by the name Toby. And my dad had the idea to name me John Talbot after his good friend Toby Hilliard Brooks. And I don't know, several months into my being alive, my parents said, John he's not really a John. And my dad made the joke. He said, there's a lot of Johns. And he said, there's like at least one in every house. And he said, let's call him Toby after my friend Toby Hilliard. So thus came the name Toby. And I've never really ever been called John, except when I happen to be pulled over and a policeman looks at my driver's license, or sometimes in college I was called John, but I answer to Toby.
Toby. Okay. So Toby is not just a pen name. That is your real name that you go by in real life. Okay. Because John Talbot Brooks sounds like a pen name to me. So
maybe my next series.
Okay. And like I was joking earlier, you typically live out in Palo Alto, and you said you have 2 homes.
That's right.
And one in Carmel as well. So lucky you. What a beautiful place to live.
Yeah, it's a nice part of the state.
I don't want to get political, but I'm kind of feeling sorry for what California's going through right now. So
yeah, it's had its challenges. It still does. It always will.
Yeah.
There are those of us that feel it should probably be 2 states. I mean, it's got the 5th largest economy in the world.
Yeah.
It really, yeah.
And there's the taxes are out of control, and I mean, I could go on and on, but it is a beautiful place, and I've been out there for 20 years now. I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in Ohio. and went to school there and have lived various places. But my last job I had in tech moved me out to San Francisco in the year 2000. So I've actually been there 24 years.
And you've had a career similar to mine where you started out thinking you were going to do one thing and then jagged into a different direction and then circumvented that. And you have a degree in journalism, correct?
That's right. And that was my first love and my intention. I really wanted to, I sort of idolized Ernest Hemingway when I was in high school and college. And I thought that was a great career path. He was later to be canceled for a lot of reasons, but he still wrote great books and was a very skilled reporter. So I went through journalism school and I got into public relations after that. And I got into the business side of public relations and client-facing jobs. And people thought that, maybe I'd do better in front of clients and pushing sales. And I got into marketing. And I sort of drifted away from the creative side of it. Not sort of, I totally drifted away from it and got into business. And by the way, that paid better, so it was attractive.
There's that, yeah.
Yeah. And then I wound up in companies, two or three companies. I started a company. It was more of a marketing job. I did some creative work, but I still had this burning desire to write. That never really left me. And then, of course, life happened. I got married, had kids, and I needed to make some money, wanted to make some money. Journalism doesn't pay particularly well unless you're in the top 1%.
Yeah.
So I stayed in business, and I always hoped that toward the end of my career, I could get into writing, particularly fiction, which is what I always wanted to write. And when I was transferred to Northern California, we had an office in Palo Alto, so I lived right on the edge of the Stanford campus. And I saw that they had a really fine continuing education program, and they had a really great creative writing program founded by William Stegner and several other famous writers. And so they had a really great teaching staff, and I started taking what were first night classes on campus, and then they went online. And I guess I've taken 20, 25 writing courses at Stanford in the last 20 years, one of which was a 2-year novel writing program, which I undertook just before COVID hit. And I was thinking about leaving my job. My wife was still working. And she said, if you want to write, now's a great time to do it. So I finished this 2-year novel writing program at Stanford, and I had a first draft of my first book, All That She Brings. And when we went on lockdown, which, you think back, we were inside for a long time doing nothing, trying to stay healthy.
Right.
And it allowed me to finish my second and third draft of the first book, ultimately publishing it just after COVID in late 21. So that was my career arc, and I retired from business just before COVID. So the timing was actually quite good.
Yeah, the timing sounds like you couldn't have planned it better if you wanted to.
It kept me sane during those lean months.
Tell me a little bit about the Stanford program, because I've always had this concept of, because my mother was a writer and I'm a writer, and we're both musicians, and I kind of think of, you can get the degrees and you can go to the classes and all of that, but if you're tone deaf, you're never going to be a singer. And I kind of feel the same way about writing. You can get the degrees but you have to have this not just the drive, but also a latent talent. So what is your outlook as far as nature versus nurture when it comes to writing in itself?
Well, I think there are very few people that just can't write. Like there are definitely people that just can't sing. My wife being one of them, she would tell you she can't carry a note in her pocket. But when it comes to writing, you can work with what you have and develop it and hone it and find your voice. My reporting training when I was in journalism school taught me to put words together in a very efficient and concise way.
Yeah.
And that was a really good discipline to learn, whether you're writing in business or whatever the case is, nonfiction, fiction. I really believe in brevity and clarity. And so I really worked on that. In the Stanford courses, the novel writing course, it was one course for 6 semesters. So 2 years with 3 semesters each. And we worked on each aspect of writing a novel: the character development, plot development, dialogue, a strong ending, a strong beginning, and it was really a fascinating process. But I certainly think I had a certain amount of skill, but I really think the more I continue to write, the more what skill I have is developed, and I think that's true for most people. You just have to do it.
Yeah.
When you develop it,
Yeah.
you become your own best editor and your own critic. You still need
Mhm.
you still need
True.
another set of eyes to read your stuff. Everyone needs an editor.
Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But
Don't edit your own work. You're too close to it.
that's right. So in both books, I was not published traditionally by a big publishing house. I did most of the work myself, but I did hire outside editors, both professors from Stanford that did freelance editing, who were very good, and a guy from New York who had worked with Scribners for many years. So with guidance, and I do think we need guidance, just like learning a sport or anything else. I think you keep working at it, and it's not something you finally get to and say I'm there, because you're never there. You keep
Right.
honing it. I'm working on the
Mhm.
sequel to this. This will be a trilogy.
Excellent.
I
And
was going to ask about that. So
Yeah.
this is going to be a trilogy.
I do
I
hope.
had a feeling. I had a feeling because I never got that. I'm still speaking as a musician. I never got that resolution, the dumb at the end. I
Right.
still felt like I'm not done, but I'm not done.
And that really
So-
wasn't my design, my intention, Melanie. I really wanted to finish the first book on a resounding note, but I couldn't get there. Matthew, who was the protagonist,
Mhm.
just can't get out of his own way. He
Right.
just never
Right.
figured out how to dig himself out of the hole. And the hallmark of any plot is you put someone in a hole and hopefully they figure out a way to get out of it. But the story is how they try to get out of it, and do they get out
yeah.
of it? The
Well,
stakes.
it was really, really. Let's go ahead and talk about your first novel, All That She Brings.
Sure.
It's based on a
There's
lot
so much to
of
talk about, and
Yeah.
it's like you've got these characters that you want to love, and you just and then the character that you want to hate on is already dead. So there's
Yeah, right.
and then the opening sequence where you think you kind of did what I am terrible with names. Okay, I'm awful with names. In blah, blah, blah. Now I can't even think of the name of the movie where they kill off what you think is the protagonist, like in the first scene.
Oh, like Psycho?
Yes, thank you. Gosh,
Okay.
why could I not think of the word?
I don't know.
You kind of did that kind of thing where you get involved with Julia,
Julia? Yeah.
Julie,
Julia.
and you think she's going to be, the focus of the book because you kind of get inside her mind and she's faking it, I guess, faking love. I don't know what you want to say. And then, I don't want to give away too much because I want people to read it, but something happens to her and you're like, oh no, this whole book is going to be about that. And then it's not.
And it just piles on. One
And
thing
it just
right
piles
after
on
the
after
other.
that. So, and yet it's still so human. I mean, there's
And-
so many aspects
yeah.
of that book that I felt. So I kind of want to go through them one at a time. So the first thing I want to talk about that you even had in your talking points, I'm over here looking at my bullet points, is surviving infidelity. And in my case, it wasn't just that, it was also abuse. So I escaped.
To be fair
It
and
wasn't him.
accurate.
It wasn't
Thank
him.
you.
No. He is actually what I want to talk about because, your book touches on, well, how do I ever love again? How do I ever open myself up to that again? And that's kind of where at least that was the feeling that I was getting from that. And then, the evolution that comes out of that. So without giving away too much of the book, because we want folks to read it, first of all, this obviously came from personal experience.
Yes.
And they always say, write what you know.
Mhm.
So elaborate on that make it so that we want to read the book, not, we don't need to read the
Sure.
book. You know how trailers nowadays in movies, it's like they gave you the whole movie away, so now I don't have to see it. I want to be really
Definitely a
careful.
money
So I'm going
saver.
We don't want to do that. So broadly speaking, it's not. Both books are about surviving either infidelity or trauma of some kind. And how do we learn to cope with that? How do we learn to forgive not only whoever's inflicted it on us, but ourselves for making mistakes or making
that's a good one, the ourselves thing, because I felt like when I was going through the forgiveness process with my first husband, he was easy because he wasn't in the picture, but forgiving myself, I'm still working on that.
Yes, and I think you always work on it, and you always live with maybe just a little bit of fear that you could do it again, and you're obviously we don't want to make those mistakes again, but the idea is to learn and grow and be better and smarter and also happier. You got to be happy. You don't want to just survive and say I'm getting by. So I mean it's a tall ask, and we all go through it at some point in our lives, and the thing that got me thinking along these lines was my first brush with trauma it wasn't a brush, it was a full-on collision, was when my dad went to get his haircut one Saturday morning when I was in high school and had a heart attack. I never saw him again. And there was no warning, and it was an absolute shock. And I had three brothers, my mother, happy family, living in
How old were you?
I was 17, just about to graduate from high school. And it was like, whoa, I didn't know life could be that harsh or that cruel. And that was my first introduction. And then, through a series of events, my first marriage that didn't work. She didn't die in a car accident, by the way. I was taking the course at Stanford, and I circulated a draft of that first chapter, and people came up to me after class and said, "I'm really sorry to hear about your wife." And I said,
"Oh, wow,
that's good writing right there."
That's a compliment. If it was so believable, that's
that
wow.
is one thing I liked about your writing, is that the dialogue, it would take place in a home. It would take place in a restaurant or a bar or whatever. There wasn't a whole lot of affectation, if you to put it that way.
Yeah, I liked the casual everyday exchanges, like right from the very beginning, because you could put yourself there, because that's the way you would talk to your spouse, and then finding out that things are different, or that's the way you would talk to a stranger, and I don't know, it was very real. So because sometimes I feel like you're reading things that they try too hard.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to life, like any trauma that we've gone through, you don't have to try too hard to write about that with emotion. I mean, I pulled it from inside of me. I won't go into too much detail, but losing someone suddenly is shocking. It's absolutely shocking. Yeah. And it continues to happen in one form or another throughout our lives. I mean, eventually we all leave this planet, and the ones that we love around us leave this planet. And it's the flip side of the most joyful part of life, which is loving and living and being a well-adjusted human being. So anyway, not to get too heavy, but I'm just trying to explore the other side of happiness, and I think it bears looking into, because a lot of people, and myself included, when you are confronted with trauma and you're angry and you're bitter and you feel like life isn't fair, it's very easy to shut down and close yourself off and go into denial and pretend it never happened. And of course, you don't want to do that.
No.
Yeah.
Short circuit yourself real quick that way.
Well, right, and you can't be happy until you forgive. You just can't. And I think a lot of people don't understand forgiveness isn't for the other person, it's for yourself. And I've had to face very similar things. In fact, your story really spoke to me, both of your stories. And I haven't finished, full disclosure, I've not finished the second book yet, but working on it. I had an experience where my father abandoned me when I was a child, and then later in life, he just appeared. And what do you do with that? I don't know this person. I don't know how to talk to this person. And he was already ill and on his way out, so I didn't really get to know him that well. But the imposition, what they expect from you, it's like, hi, I'm back now, and I'm going to move in with you. And it's like, not so much. But
yeah. So that first book, you related to that first book.
Yeah.
When Albert showed up.
Yeah.
Right.
Out of the blue. Yeah.
Yeah. So was that something that happened with you, or was that a character that you thought?
The parallel with Albert leaving home was my father's death and just disappearing. Albert walked out on them one day and disappeared went to paint in the south of France, but they completely lost touch with him.
So which is like a death in a way.
Yeah, he might as well have died. And then he shows up on his doorstep. So I thought that would be interesting.
Yeah. No, that is interesting. It
Awful
was a
lot to
nice.
happen to a main character
Yeah, he
book,
goes through, he really goes through he runs through the gamut.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, he's got kind of a Job characteristic to him.
Yes, there is. And I'll be honest with you, my biggest fear in writing my first book was that I'd bore my reader and lose my reader, just because they think it was worth, going on. And when you write a book, you're entering into a contract with anybody that chooses to read it that you're not going to waste their time. I mean, you've got to really hope and try as hard as you can to hold their attention, to make their time worthwhile.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I kept throwing those curveballs out there, and I think it worked. People kept turning the page to see what happened next.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
To the point where they got to the end and they came to me and said, what happens next?
Right.
As you
said, I didn't get the result. I didn't get the dong.
There was no resounding ending. A lot of, as they say, bowling pins still in the air, but that was part of my technique, and it leads into the second book and then the third book, which will, by the way, have a resounding thud at the end.
We'll definitely have to have you back for the third book.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to reading it.
Yeah.
I would love that.
Yeah. Oh, well, let's talk about the childhood trauma. And I mean, there's a psychologist involved. And like I said, I don't want to touch too much. I don't want to give too much away. But as far as the novel is concerned versus really real life and that loss of innocence, how long can we dwell in our innocence, being unaware that we're innocent, and then all of a sudden, I'm not so innocent? And are there things that as adults we can still claim we're innocent on, or have we just completely lost it altogether?
God, that's a really good question, Melanie. I like to think there are still things that can keep us innocent, but as I get older, I just turned 72.
You're 72?
That ain't no
Dang,
72.
boy.
Come on.
Using some oil of a layup in there or something. I don't
know. No work done.
I'm sucking up. You really don't look 70. I never would have guessed.
No, never.
Never would have guessed.
All genetic. My dear mother passed on her youthful looks. Anyway, what was I saying?
Innocence in adults. Do
Innocence.
we have any innocence as adults left?
Gosh, I don't think you have a lot of innocence left the older you get. The key is to not become cynical. The key is not to become
jaded, just so jaded.
Or resentful in any way. I mean, and the point of these books is, life throws a lot at us. It's not just Matthew Banks in these books. It's not just me. It's not just you guys. Everybody deals with a lot. And our hope and our goal is to stay on top of it. And it's up to us to make of it what we will.
Yeah.
And it's very common, and I've been there, to turn it in the wrong direction and become a jaded and a cynical person. So I think one of life's great challenges, and I'm not deeply religious, but I think religion does play a part of this. One of our greatest challenges is to maintain faith that there is a higher or and a higher purpose.
Yeah.
And that ultimately it's all good.
Well, I felt the religious overtones I didn't feel like it was religious, but I felt like there was that spiritual aspect, religious overtone with our stranger, our homeless friend who was prophetic. And, we find that hope and we find that growth pattern in the weirdest places. And, some people say we were visited by angels, and you could have gone that way. You kind of left that to the reader's discretion, which I think is skillful. I'm going to be honest. I'm not blowing smoke up your tutu, but I think that's skillful, the way that you did that without being all, and now we're on the God channel. Let people discover that for themselves.
Yeah.
Was that an inspiration? Was that a person in your life, or was that completely fabricated?
Well, I am pretty spiritual. I was raised Episcopalian. My dad was quite religious. We went to church a lot. Our neighbor was the minister at our church, and my best friend to this day is his son, David.
Oh, how sweet. Wow. You had a PK as a friend. You were a troublemaker.
Yeah. he was a troublemaker. I kept him. Anyway, I think that's one of our built-in sources of hope is if you can add and bring a spiritual component to your life that transcends the black and white nitty-gritty good and evil of this world. That's a real plus. I mean, that's a real source of strength. And it's sort of I love the expression, let go and let God. Just let fate take over. Release yourself to the universe and believe that it's going to work out.
I know that's been a real challenge for me personally the last several months, although it certainly has come around a bit.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
You said in your press kit that you actually have a framed copy of the Serenity Prayer hanging in your office. And I love that prayer. I've never really been to an AA, thing, but they use it in other 12-step programs and whatnot. But the first time I heard that prayer, I had no idea that's what it was related to. And I just thought, what a perfect prayer. Because half the time,
a lovely prayer.
I don't know the difference.
Yeah.
And I need that wisdom. We pray for wisdom a lot.
Yeah, a lot. To know the difference.
Yeah.
We are mortal. We are fallible. We are flawed. We just have to believe that we're going to figure it out just enough. That it's not going to beat us. It's not going to defeat us.
Yeah, I like that a lot. So that was when I read that because I had already read part of the book before I got your press kit, and then when I read that, I was like, oh, this is actually putting some puzzle pieces in place, because it helped me kind of understand a little bit about where you're coming from in some of those situations, and it made me like it more. So I know that was I'm weird like that.
And my brother who passed a couple of years ago was in the program.
Okay.
Sober for 29 years. And
outstanding.
Good gracious, God bless him.
Last year of his life, he fell off the wagon.
No.
It didn't last long. And he just, for a lot of reasons, he just gave up and said, the hell with it. And I to this day, I really miss him. But when I was cleaning out his things, that was hanging in his bedroom. And my mom said, do you want this? And she said, I don't want it. I said, of course I want it. I said, because he would want me to be reading this. I mean, I don't have a...
That just means so much more now. I love that story.
Yeah, it's just a great prayer. And he died fairly happy. He was ill with cancer, so I think he saw the end coming. It wasn't like he ended his sobriety because he just lost the strength. I think he just said, that's it. That's it.
I had a good run. Might as well enjoy the last.
I get that.
Yeah.
I kind of get that. Yeah.
I don't blame him, really. Anyway, on to lighter subjects.
Lighter subjects. Well, I just want to ask a couple more things about
I'm all ears.
being unfaithful. Well, in the very first chapter, Matthew says, and I used to believe this, saying I love you always counts. It always counts. And with me, and Jim can attest to this, I'm a very works and tangible and feel it person. And I think words are cheap. Jim needs to hear the words, and I keep forgetting that. So for me, it's like, if I'm going to say that, I'm going to really, really mean it. So you're not going to hear it all the time. I'm not going to toss it at you like rice.
Yes.
And so I really loved that line. I actually wrote it down because she was just flippant about it. She's like, not in this particular case, whatever. And then, what little you learn about her in the short time we get to know her, she just really is faking it in life, in the bedroom, saying she loves people. And, she kind of had a come to Jesus moment, and then all things went, haywire after that. But I don't really have a question. I just wanted to say how much I appreciated that. I felt like Julia, I almost kind of want a backstory on Julia and how she got to the point where she just didn't care anymore. She just kind of faked it and just wanted the thrill and nothing else.
Other readers have asked for more information on her because she is an interesting character.
Mm-hmm.
I did have a whole chapter on her story. She was raised in an upper middle class New England family, and I had, came from money and was very bright and very beautiful. But, she didn't really know how to love anybody. And even though she had this affair, she did regret it briefly, as the book says. But that infidelity was based on my first marriage. I won't go into details, but there were a lot of similarities. And my former wife, with whom I'm still very good friends, did not die in a car crash. But I was able to draw on that emotion of finding letters, and that's how I found out.
Oh.
So that was based on personal experience. But I don't want to give too much.
Well, I'm
no,
gonna,
we don't want you to.
I'm going to be honest. I think it would be easier for me to find out that after they died than it would be if they're still around and I have to deal with them.
I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe I'm weird, but yeah, it would hurt, but they're already gone, so you can move on. Whereas, finding out while you're still with them, which is, how it happened to me, you just feel so.
They're both really, lousy lousy
Yeah.
to find out. I mean, it's no fun at all. But
Yeah.
it happens.
There's no good way.
All right. Well, okay.
Way.
So let's talk about happier things. There's a lot about finding solace in art. And I don't want to give away spoiler with the second book, but I think that's such a great concept, what happens with him and the urn. But your art is writing, obviously. Do you have other art outlets? And was this an inspiration?
No, I don't. I did a little painting in college and did a little ceramics in college.
I love ceramics. I love ceramics.
And I do too. And I think one of the things I loved about it, and one of the things Matthew loves about it, is that it gives you the opportunity to make something from absolutely nothing, and you can make whatever you want.
Mm-hmm.
So in a life that was spinning out of control, he could make a beautiful pot or a beautiful bowl, and he could make it any color he wanted to, any size he wanted to. But for that period of time, he was working on a piece. He was in control.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I feel that way. Didn't mean to interrupt, but I know that in the writing process, if I'm writing fiction, we kind of do the same thing. We can create something out of virtual nothing, and we're literal gods over the universe we create. We can, make these two people fall in love, or
kill them off in the first scene.
Kill them off, or do a Alfred Hitchcock in the first scene, right? But it strikes me as the people who are able to do it well, whether it's ceramics or theater or writing.
I crochet.
She crochets. So it's amazing how we can. And I've used acting and writing as coping mechanisms for a lot of things myself. So I kind of get where you're coming from with that. It's it can be very therapeutic. At the same time, if you're very good at it, it can move beyond therapy into something a little bit bigger.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Just talking about art in general.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, it's an escape. It's a refuge. You can leave your current life and put yourself in an entirely different environment, different setting, different people. Which is what I did with my fiction. I mean, every scene I wrote, I was sitting in the middle of that room, observing this scene, listening to these people talk, and it was. I wasn't going through any particular trauma at the time other than COVID, but it was a great escape. And it was, and I literally lose myself for hours. Go to work and come back hours later, and I'm still at my desk pounding away. And she goes, "Did the dogs get a walk?" And I say, "Oh, yeah."
Oh. I'll find myself when I'm in the zone, when I'm like drawing. I'll actually be doing the potty dance. I'm like, I am a grown adult. I need to get up and I need to, take care of it. I'm hungry. I haven't peed in 6 hours.
Isn't that a wonderful thing?
It's wonderful.
Yes and no.
Yeah, there's that escape, and then there's the opportunity to control something, as you said, Jim. Something that's in your control.
Right.
For that brief moment in time, you call all the shots.
Yeah.
And that can both be daunting, and it also can be extremely exhilarating. The other thing is, you're creating something that should hopefully have some kind of impact on whoever comes across it and takes it in. whoever picks up your piece of crochet, or maybe it's a sweater or a pair of socks or something.
I haven't gotten that involved yet. I do Tamagotchi and Afghans, so
but still, I mean,
it's
people
about
pick
my
it up
life.
and it elicits a response, and that is all any piece of art is intended to do, is maybe take somebody who picks it up and absorbs it to a different place, and just, bring something new into their life, however brief. And people ask me why I write these books, and I said, well, that's a really good question, but I'm hoping that it resonates with people to the point where they say, that makes me understand the situation I had a little bit better. And if nothing else, I don't feel alone in going through these things. And
my experience with writing and music in particular is when somebody asks you, why do you do that? It's like, well, because I can't not do it. It's such a huge part of my life. It's not something I can do. I mean, I can set crochet aside and walk away, but I can't stop playing, I can't stop singing, and I can't stop writing because that's such a huge part of me. And I can
that's
see
a gift, isn't it, that you found that? That's a gift.
Yeah, and I can see how, somebody, my sister, who I discovered through the discovery of my father, who I didn't know.
Oh,
I
wow.
had a sister. She got her MFA, and she's a brilliant painter, and does artwork like that. And I watch as her painting. She'll be working on a project, and it'll progress and progress and progress, but it feels like it's never done. And I never actually see her post, "It's finished." Have you ever felt that way with your writing?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the first two books the first book was supposed to be one book, and then it became two.
Yeah.
Now it's become three. So yeah, I have a real problem with endings.
A lot of writers do. It's not like getting started and just coming to an end has actually been my biggest issues.
Adams, who said book 6 of the increasingly ill-named trilogy of the
Yeah,
Hitchhiker's
something
Guide
like
to
that.
the Galaxy. I think there were 7. It was supposed to be a trilogy, yeah.
Right. No, it's hard. And I also, frankly, don't look forward to the day when Matthew Banks is no longer in my life, because I've been living with this guy for 5, 6 years.
Yeah.
I do think I'll leave him. I'll let him be.
Because they become real people when you're really
Absolutely.
in tune with what you're doing. I remember I was writing a novel for National Novel Writing Month one time, and Melanie will attest. I was sobbing because I had killed somebody. I let them die. I'm like, oh, to die. Typity. So yeah, it's weird.
It's funny because if you do the outline of the book, you're like, yeah, I'm going to kill this person off. But sometimes you'll be writing and they're like, oh, I'm going to kill this person off. Well, I didn't mean to do that, but off you go.
It's and you never know. I mean, you never see those things coming. So all of a sudden, it seems like, of course, I've got to do that. Of course,
Yeah.
that's what's going to happen. Yeah, my poor wife would read drafts of chapters of my both books, actually. And you know how it works, Jim. You can write a chapter or a couple of chapters and create a character, and then all of a sudden you realize that it doesn't work. And
right, and you just
that character just disappears. And Kelly, my wife, was reading a book after she'd read a couple of chapters. She said, what happened to Dooley, who was a character I created?" And I said, "Oh, he just didn't fit in. He didn't make it." She goes, "I really liked him. He was actually Madeline's husband's brother."
Okay.
Anyway, he got written off. He wound up on the floor. So it's
just like when shooting a film, or like a Godfather, for example. The novel, there's this whole side story of a doctor, of a plastic surgeon who fixed Michael Corleone's face. There was one line about him in the movie.
That's right. Yeah.
So it's like, sometimes you gotta sacrifice for the greater good.
A 3.5-hour movie. I mean.
Yeah. So.
So this is something I do, and I don't know if I'm just weird, but when you have something like that where you've probably written quite a few words on a particular character and he ends up on the cutting room floor, do you keep him in a tickler file? Do you think maybe he'll become a character in a different story? Do you ever recycle?
Sure. Yeah, I have a junk pile of chapters and excerpts that I cut out. That a lot of it's some of my best writing, and you learn that there's an expression, you have to kill your darlings.
I call it kill your
Yep,
babies. Yep.
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 You don't throw it out because you think it's such brilliant writing, but then you realize that it doesn't fit into the story and it has no place, and you got to get rid of it. So no, I try to hang on to that stuff. If I don't hang on to it in my hard drive, I hang on to it up here, and I'll pull it out. I'll pull it out to use again.
I don't have that good of a memory. I actually have a file. Back in the olden days, I actually had a physical file. Okay, we're going to take a quick break because Jim's laptop is about to die, and we need to figure out what that beep is.
Yeah.
5 minutes later.
Let's talk about the new novel, A Place for Dorothy. So this is actually a sequel of All That She Brings. Like I was saying earlier, you kind of left us hanging, so, or at least, what did you say, the pin spinning? So,
Bowling pins in the air.
yeah, bowling pins in the air. Yeah, that freeze frame in the Matrix, and it's like, what's going to happen next? So we kind of touched on this a little bit lightly with dads showing up in the middle of nowhere. And again, I don't want to give away too much, but now we have a baby mama showing up in the middle of nowhere, and all that brings in. And I guess my first thought was, this happens in real life. This happens in soap operas. This happens in movies where, the unknown baby mama shows up, and they always act like it's supposed to be a package deal. Like, here's your kid, and now you're stuck with me too. And I could never understand that because, that relationship is over, but that child is your flesh and
If
blood.
it ever really was a true relationship to begin with.
Yeah. And then not being able to bond with that child because it's after the fact. And, there were a lot of emotions for me just in, and like I said, I have not finished the book, but there was a lot of emotions in that. And without revealing too much, tell me about that inspiration, because that did go in a very different direction.
Yeah, I don't know where that came from, to be honest with you. I needed to bring the two main characters back together. I didn't want to separate them forever. That would have been the end of the story. And Madeline, the co-protagonist, who's the mother of Matthew's child, is interesting in that she has a very religious background. She was an orphan that was raised in a convent, and yet she has this baby out of wedlock, and she refuses to be a single mother. She just can't bring herself to allow that to happen. She already has a child from a marriage that ended with her husband's death. So without getting too complicated, but I needed to bring them back together, and so she follows him out to California. I don't want to give too much away.
Right.
With her child, and the child's born at the end of the first book, and everyone said, "Well, what happens? What happens? Do they get married? Do they come together after she has the baby in his house on the floor at the end of the first book?" And I said, "Well, I don't know what happens. Let me go back to the drawing board." So I pick up the sequel, A Place for Dorothy, 2 years later. So the baby's now 2 years old, this little
Toddler, yeah.
Beautiful little girl. And they're living in this hacienda in Pasadena that Matthew inherited from his mother. It's a big Spanish colonial, beautiful home, red tile roof. It's 8,000 square feet. It sits on a huge piece of property. And so they're thrown together in this thing. His father, the woman that has his child, the child, and the woman's Madeline's son from the previous marriage, Bradley, who's 12 or maybe 10 in the book at that point. And my thought was, let's put them all together in this house under one roof. And they don't all choose to be there together. It's not a traditional family by any means.
Mm-hmm.
And let's just put them under this one roof and light the fuse and see what happens. And all kinds of crazy stuff happens. I won't go into it, but Matthew's mother, Dorothy, from which the title's taken, has died. And that's how he got the house, and he had her cremated. And her ashes are in a makeshift urn that he throws together. And a lot of the book is about where this urn winds up. It has a life of its own before it winds up in the ground.
Oh no.
And so A Place for Dorothy is reference to, what are we going to do with Mom's ashes? And that was from a personal experience. We didn't bury my mom for a couple of years. We just didn't know where to bury her. And it became kind of a sort of a dark, sort of macabre joke. But A Place for Dorothy came from, in my mom's last years, we were looking for a place to put her in assisted living, and there was an assisted living organization called A Place for Mom.
A Place for Mom. I've heard of that. Yeah.
National organization. So I kind of stole that title and made it the title of my book. But I never outlined the story beforehand. It's just organic as I write it, and a lot of writers write that way. Some people outline.
I'm that way.
They outline the story, they just fill in the blanks, and they write it out. It's done, or at least the first draft is done. And my writing is, I write by the seat of my pants. I'm called a pantser.
I'm a pantser too.
Yes,
And things just happen. And when you say, what was the genesis of that, or where did that come from? It just comes from my crazy imagination. It comes out of nowhere. And that's part of the fun of it. It's you never know what's going to pop. And sometimes I just have to sit down and write and to get it going. And the damnedest things pop up. It just comes to me.
Right.
You're inspired. I've started several novels. I never actually finished one, but something I've noticed in the ones that I've done the most work on is I have characters that it's like they just arrive, and it's like, I didn't create you. Where'd you come from? And all of a sudden you're writing this character. So
yeah, they're writing themselves, actually, right?
Yeah, that's
absolutely.
kind of what it feels like. Yeah.
And you look back on it sometimes and think, I wrote that?
Yeah. Where did that come from?
Yeah, where did that come from?
That's really fun.
The phrase broken family comes up, but the way I was looking at it, it's more like a mosaic. It's like cobbled together from broken pieces that came from different things, which in itself is an amazing art form. So the family itself has almost become this work of art that they can find solace in. And I kind of want to comment a little bit, not so much on the book itself, but on the concept that this relays. Our society almost encourages this brokenness. And, we're joking about how your books don't resolve, but do you think there is a way to fix this, or is this just something we have to deal with from now on? This brokenness.
Gosh, I hope we can fix it. My kids from my first marriage are a product of a broken marriage, and my current wife's kids are as well. And there's a whole population of children, post-baby boomers, who are products of broken families. Excuse me. And, I think, kids learn to cope and they adapt. It's not great. It's not the way it's meant to be. I mean, I do think children need two parents, especially when they both have to work. And in this day and age, there's no parents at home anymore watching the kids. You just
latchkey kids.
Yeah, nobody has that luxury. So I don't know. It's I hate to think this, but it seems almost insurmountable. I mean, people are selfish. Marriages don't last. What is it? 1 out of every 2 marriages ends in divorce, and it's really very, very sad statistic.
Right.
But with the advent of social media and how fast things move these days, and how inward people have become and how selfish people have become, I mean, I'm not immune to it myself. I think the chances of us going back to a nuclear family model writ large is pretty thin. I think it's sadly it's not a happy situation.
No.
Yeah, it's like you'd almost have to create your own side society and insulate yourself from the rest of the world.
And I've got 2 kids that are of marriage age. My daughter's 29, my son's 31, and my wife has a son who's 31 and a son who's 28, and they aren't anywhere close to getting married. And I happen to think, we've talked about this, I happen to think they're gun shy.
Yeah.
It's understandable.
I mean, all the benefits have been removed now. All the reasons. You're probably not going to stay together. if you do break up, the guy gets the bone, he basically gets ruined financially, and that's a terrible setup. And people don't break up amicably anymore. They don't.
No, it's very rare.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the fallout, in my book, getting back to my books, Matthew is a victim of his father leaving. So his parents had a broken marriage, and then his first marriage ended in less than perfect circumstances. And his biggest problem now is trying to trust this new woman who had his child. And, if he was smart, he would marry her and never let her out of his sight because she's a saint. But he can't commit. And so the question becomes, what is it going to take to get him to a place where he can enter into a trusting, loving relationship?
So he's gun shy, and part of that might be the too good to be true phenomenon. It's like, okay, well, I trusted somebody before, and they were okay, and they turned out to be, rats. This person comes along, and I don't know, I'm just not buying it.
Right.
And that's that jaded thing we were talking about earlier.
Yeah. And it's a fear of failure. What happens? How am I going to survive if the marriage fails? But there's also a fear of success in the thinking that, what if I'm disappointed when it works out? What if I realize this isn't what it was all cracked up to be? So anyway, there's a lot of challenges.
Yeah, I think the thing that a lot of people, and there's that hope in the novel that there's always that undertone that people don't face in real life is, well, yeah, what if all this happens? What if the worst happens? But what if you miss out?
Right.
Nobody
really wants to be alone. I mean, that's
And what if it turns out great? What if there is a happily ever after? And tell me, is that a better resolution, a happily ever after? I mean, how do you end this?
No, in fact, the first book was supposed to end with a happily ever after ending, and I thought, no, that doesn't work. People expect that; it's too predictable. Mm-hmm. So I didn't end it. And then I got to the same point in the second book, and I couldn't end it. Excuse me. Sam Shepard, a great novelist, playwright, actor,
Definitely.
said endings were the hardest thing, and when he wasn't happy with an ending, he just flipped it. So when I got to the end of my second book, I had a happy ending. I had written it all out. They were riding off into the sunset, sunsets, butterflies, the whole thing. And I thought, this is BS. This doesn't add up. I don't think I put these people in a place where they've earned this yet. So I flipped it, and I'm not going to say how.
Right.
But I flipped the ending, and so the third book, I am right now at the point where I'm trying to figure out how to finish it with an ending that is both believable, but also somewhat unpredictable.
Okay.
And happy. All those things at the same time.
All right. So no pressure there, Toby. No.
Probably the hardest bit of writing I'll ever do, at least at this point in my career. And I'll get there, but it's going to take a while. I've gone through a couple of different iterations and a couple of different drafts, and it's really difficult because I've created these complex characters that have to change in a believable way. And in order for it to be believable, I have to believe it. And I'm,
right.
In that sense, I'm my own harshest critic.
My own experience with your writing, as well as quite a few reviews I've read on Goodreads and Amazon, just how realistic they are, the story, how readable they are, and you've been getting a lot of praise. What is your response to all of this positive? I mean, somebody even comparing you to John Cheever, who's like, he's an amazing writer.
I wonder what my response would be. Show me the money.
That's my wife's response. She said to me once, a couple of years into it, she goes, "Oh, I get it," because people were talking about maybe turning it into a Netflix series. And I said, "There's be money in that." She goes, "No, I get that. Yeah. This is a get rich slow scheme."
Right.
I said, right. Well, maybe if I'm lucky. Yeah. Anyway, I'm flattered, obviously. My fiction is realist fiction. It's written like like it's really happening real time.
Right.
It's sort of bare bones the way Hemingway wrote. So
Sure.
that's the way I like to write. There are a lot of people who don't enjoy that kind of fiction, that don't read that kind of fiction, that
Sure.
would rather read something that's more mystical or fantastical
Sure.
uh,
Sure.
but it's the writing I do, and I'm glad that there's an audience for it. I'm glad that there are people that enjoy reading it, because I think it's pretty entertaining. And I tell people, it'll be a quick read. If I give them a book, like a neighbor, I'll give a book. I'll say,
Yeah.
it's a quick read, and you'll read in a couple days or
Yeah.
not,
Yeah.
and don't
Couple
feel
hours.
like
Yeah.
you have to finish it. But I haven't come across too many people that didn't finish it.
Yeah. Well, I think something that people are hungry for, and Disney kind of learned this hard with their bastardization of the Star Wars genre, is people don't want Mary Sue's, that, things where everything just comes easy and they just float through life. People don't want that. They want to see the character arc. They want to see a jerk become a caring person. They want to see a bumbling idiot learn a trade, and they want to see a change of heart. They want to see that growth.
Right.
And
Right.
and I think that's why there's such a hunger
And
for
I think that's
books
what
like
might
yours.
one of the things that makes your writing so appealing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so this poor guy,
Yeah, no kidding.
is he ever going to be able to just sit back and go,
I don't know. We'll find out. But you should finish the second book, because
I will definitely.
Well,
I will finish the second book, and as soon as the third book comes out, I will be devouring that so that we can talk about it when we bring you back on.
I would love that, you guys. I really would. I'd be honored. It'd be wonderful, and I'll keep in touch with you and let you know. I'm hoping to finish it by the end of the year, so it should
Oh,
be
wow.
perfect. Okay.
should be
Wow,
published.
you are a machine. Look at you go. All right, well, Toby, it has been a genuine pleasure having you on, and I look forward again to hearing from you. And let's once again tell everybody how they can find you and your books.
Well, thanks to both of you. My website is tobybrooks.com, TOBYBROOKES.com. You can find everything you need and more at that website.
And more. All right.
Thank you.
I'm sensing there might be merch in the works.
Who knows? Thank you so much.
Well, it's a lot of
Anytime.
fun. Enjoy your family, and thanks again for taking time from
Oh.
your family and clear across the country. And I hope you have a lovely time and safe travels home.
Thanks so much.
And we will definitely talk to you again, Toby. Thank you
Take
so
care,
much.
Toby. Thanks so much.
Okay, thanks you. Thank you. Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.